You have been lied to since the beginning. They told you politeness would protect you, that staying soft and agreeable would keep the world kind to you, that shrinking yourself was the price of peace. But look closely at what that belief really did. Each time you stayed quiet to avoid tension, each time you swallowed your words to keep the mood light, each time you said yes when everything in you wanted to say no, it didn't bring peace. It slowly erased your presence. People didn't become kinder. They became comfortable overlooking you. Constant agreeableness doesn't earn respect. It dissolves it. Niceness without strength fades into the background. Silence without intention starts to look like weakness. Eventually, you're no longer seen as kind. You're simply unseen. The Stoics understood this long before us. Virtue without firmness is fragile. A calm, grounded refusal carries more weight than endless apologies. Living truthfully sometimes means disappointing others rather than betraying yourself. Boundaries are not rude. Taking up space is not selfish. Strength doesn't need to be loud to be real. So why do we smile while resentment builds? Why do we apologize for existing? Why do we fear our own edge? This isn't kindness. It's quiet self-abandonment. And the cost is high. Confidence erodes. Purpose dulls. Presence disappears. If this hits you, take a moment. Commit to your own growth and presence. It's the first step toward lasting strength. When you see the pattern for what it is, everything changes. Strength no longer feels aggressive. Boundaries no longer feel cruel. Saying no becomes clean. Calm becomes firm. Respect stops being chased. It starts forming naturally around you. There's more strength, clarity, and depth inside you than the world currently sees. Choose growth over comfort. Truth over approval. A steady, disciplined strength. The Stoics believed this was the foundation of a free life. And remember, the word sorry isn't just a word. It's a reflex. It's wired into you, like blinking or flinching. Most of us say it before we even register what's happening. Someone else walks into you on the street, and you're the one apologizing. You raise your hand in a meeting to ask a valid question, and your voice already leads with, "Sorry to interrupt." The coffee shop gets your order wrong, and before they can speak, you say, "Sorry about that." And what's wild is that none of those situations actually call for an apology. You didn't cause harm. You didn't violate any sacred rule of life. You simply existed, made a request, or stood up for a need. And still, you felt the need to apologize. Why? Because somewhere along the way, sorry stopped being about remorse. It became a shield, a way to soften your presence, to make yourself more digestible to others. The problem is, when you use sorry like that, you're not diffusing tension. You're lowering yourself. You're telling people, often unconsciously, my time, my thoughts, my existence is less important than yours. And that message, it sticks. It becomes part of how others treat you. Not because they're cruel, but because you're teaching them how to see you. From a Stoic perspective, this is more than a language issue. It's a dignity issue. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The things you think about determine the quality of your mind. Your soul takes on the color of your thoughts." If you constantly think of yourself as an inconvenience, that's how your presence will begin to feel, not just to you, but to everyone around you. The words you choose are not just sounds, they're signposts. And sorry, when overused, is a sign that says, I am small, I am guilty, I am afraid of taking up space. But this isn't about never apologizing. That's not the point. If you've truly caused harm, if your actions created pain or chaos, then owning that, apologizing sincerely, and making amends is noble. It's powerful. But most of the time, your sorry is covering for something much quieter. Fear of conflict, fear of being seen, fear of being misunderstood or disliked. You throw it out like a safety blanket, hoping it will protect you. But in reality, it's stripping you of your backbone one word at a time. The worst part is that this habit trains you to see yourself as a problem before anyone else even forms an opinion. Anticipation of rejection. That deep-rooted insecurity. It's not humility. It's a slow erosion of self-respect, and people can feel it. They might not know why they talk over you or why they don't take your ideas seriously, but deep down, they've absorbed your cues. You've broadcasted the message that you're not quite confident in what you're saying. That's how social hierarchies are built. not just by volume or titles, but by invisible signals, posture, tone, and language. The way out isn't swinging to the other extreme and never taking responsibility. The way out is clarity. It's knowing the difference between being accountable and being submissive. It's choosing your words with intention, not out of habit. One of the most practical ways to start changing this pattern is by replacing the instinct to apologize with expressions of gratitude. You walk into a meeting a few minutes late, and instead of shrinking with, "Sorry I'm late," you say, "Thanks for your patience." It's subtle, but it changes everything. The first version asks for forgiveness, the second offers acknowledgement and presence. Or maybe someone helped you out after you forgot something. Instead of saying, "Sorry, I forgot," try, "Thanks for reminding me." It lifts the energy, it empowers both sides. You're not asking to be forgiven, you're showing up in a way that says, "I recognize your effort and I'm not defined by this small misstep." Seneca said, "He who is brave is free." And bravery in this context isn't about running into burning buildings. It's about showing up to your own life without constantly apologizing for existing in it. It's about reclaiming your language so your words reflect the self-respect you're working so hard to build. Because at the end of the day, if you want others to respect your voice, you have to first stop using it to apologize for yourself. It takes practice. You'll catch yourself mid-sentence. You'll feel the sorry rise in your throat like a reflex. That's normal. It's the residue of years of being trained to feel guilty for being human. But each time you pause, each time you swap in a thank you, or simply hold your tongue in silence, you're rewiring the way you think about yourself and the way others do too. That's what real self-mastery looks like. Quiet, consistent, and grounded. Carl Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But you can't become that person if you're constantly apologizing for the parts of you that are already enough. Let your words reflect your value. Not inflated, not arrogant, but clear, solid, whole, because you're not here to tiptoe, you're here to stand tall. And when you do, when you speak like someone who belongs in the room, the world adjusts. People listen differently, they respond differently. Respect doesn't have to be demanded. It flows naturally when your presence stops asking for permission. And it all starts with one tiny shift, letting go of the reflex to say sorry, when there's absolutely nothing to be sorry for. The nervous smile. There's a moment we've all felt but rarely talk about. You're in a situation that stings. Maybe someone throws a passive-aggressive jab, or you're cut off mid-sentence in front of others. Or your boss points out a mistake in a way that feels less like feedback and more like an attack. And in that moment, what do? You smile. Not because you're happy, not because you find it amusing, but because your body, trained over years, pulls that muscle like a reflex. That nervous smile, tight, polite, and automatic, becomes your shield. It's your way of saying, "I'm not a threat, don't hurt me, I'll be agreeable, I'll disappear if you want me to." And yet, ironically, that very smile, that gesture you hope will smooth things over, quietly does the opposite. People don't respect the smile that shows up in the wrong moment. They don't see it as kindness. They see it as confusion, fear, or worst of all, submissiveness. When your face sends a signal that your words and energy don't support, others begin to distrust what you're presenting. There's a deep psychological dissonance in seeing someone's eyes flash with discomfort while their mouth stretches into a grin. It's unsettling because it suggests that you're not fully present, or worse, not fully honest with yourself. Over time, this becomes your ground. The Stoics believed in emotional mastery, not suppression, but harmony. Epictetus once said, "Any person capable of angering you becomes your master." But the opposite is true too. If you smile to protect others from your own boundaries, you become their servant. You give them the illusion that their disrespect is okay, that they're in the right, and that you will absorb it silently. That's not patience, that's self-erasure. So why do we do it? Because most of us were conditioned from childhood to associate politeness with survival. We were taught that if we made everyone around us feel comfortable, even at our own expense, we'd avoid conflict, we'd be liked, we'd stay safe. And as we grew, that nervous smile became our armor. But the truth is, that armor leaks. People pick up on the energy beneath the smile, they feel the discomfort, they sense the anxiety. And the very thing you hope will prevent confrontation often invites more of it. When you respond to rudeness or disrespect with a smile, you're giving people permission to continue. You're training them to believe you're fine with being stepped on, and they will continue, not necessarily out of malice, but out of habit, because you've set the tone. You've handed them the script, and they're reading it line by line. But here's the shift. You don't need to smile to prove you're okay. You don't need to smile to diffuse every uncomfortable moment. Sometimes the most powerful response is no response. Just stillness. Just calm. Just holding your expression neutral, not cold, not aggressive, just aligned with what's real. You let your face reflect the seriousness of the situation, not to create tension but to acknowledge it. And in that silence, in that grounded non-reaction, people feel the weight of their own behavior. It's amazing what happens when you stop reacting. When someone says something off and you simply look at them, not with anger, not with hurt, but with a steady, emotionless presence. The silence stretches. They become aware of what they said. They feel it echo back at them. And more often than not, they course correct because they realize, consciously or not, that their words didn't land the way they thought they would. That's the power of restraint. That's the weight of unshaken presence. Aristotle believed that virtue lies in the balance between deficiency and excess. Too much reaction makes you look volatile. Too little and you seem detached. But the middle path, the Stoic path, is the ability to remain anchored, to feel your emotions rise and still choose your expression consciously. You reclaim your face. You reclaim your voice. And in doing so, you begin to teach people how to treat you. You don't owe anyone a performance. You don't need to plaster on a smile to make other people feel safe when they've disrespected your boundaries. You can stand still. You can hold the moment. And what's wild is how quickly others notice the shift. The same people who once dismissed your discomfort suddenly feel the need to earn your respect. They may not say it aloud, but they feel it because stillness, when held with intention, is louder than any outburst. This isn't about becoming cold. It's not about withholding warmth. In fact, this is what allows your real warmth to matter. When you smile because you're genuinely joyful, people feel it. It carries weight. It's not a nervous habit. It's a choice, and that makes it more valuable. Your facial expressions, your energy, your tone, when they match the truth of the moment, they become instruments of integrity, and that's what others trust. Carl Jung once said, "In each of us, there is another whom we do not know." That other self, the one who's calm under pressure, who doesn't need to please everyone, who can sit in discomfort without dissolving into it. That self is already in you. You don't have to create it. You just have to stop covering it up. The nervous smile is a mask you've worn long enough. And once you take it off, people start seeing you as you really are. Not passive, not agreeable, not fragile, but whole. Every time you catch that smile rising when it's not real, pause. Don't force it down, just notice it. Ask yourself what you're trying to protect, and then breathe. Let your face relax. Let your presence speak. Over time, the habit fades and something stronger replaces it, something grounded, calm, and commanding. Because the most powerful people in the room aren't always the loudest. They're often the ones who don't flinch, the ones whose stillness makes others rise to meet them. And when your presence stops apologizing, stops shrinking, stops smiling when it doesn't want to, that's when people start to notice, and that's when you start to feel what true inner strength really looks like. The oversharing habit. There's a strange pressure we feel when we tell someone no. It's like we're not allowed to leave it at that. We feel the need to soften it, to justify it, to make sure the other person isn't disappointed or upset with us. So we pile on the reasons. I can't make it because my cat's been sick, I haven't slept, work's a mess, and my car is acting up again. We turn a simple boundary into a full-blown presentation, hoping they'll understand if we just explain enough. But here's the problem. When you start defending your boundaries like they're on trial, you're sending a message you may not intend. You're saying, "I don't trust this note to stand on its own. I'm asking for your permission to keep it." What you think is being polite or respectful often ends up doing the opposite. It signals doubt. It tells people there might be wiggle room. And those who are used to pushing boundaries will sniff that out immediately. They'll question your reasons, poke holes in your story, suggest workarounds. What if I pick you up? What if we make it quick? And suddenly, you're stuck, cornered by your own over-explaining. The more you say, the more you invite negotiation. Not because people are cruel, but because you've turned the conversation into proving your excuse instead of stating your choice. But boundaries aren't math problems. You don't need to show your work. You're not in court. You're not asking to be found innocent. You're just saying no, and that is enough. Stoic philosophy makes this clear. Power doesn't lie in how long you talk. It lies in how certain you are. Seneca said, "If you wish to be loved, love. But if you wish to be respected, respect your own lines first." When you honor your time and energy without dressing it up in apologies or disclaimers, others learn to do the same. It doesn't mean you become cold. It doesn't mean you lack compassion. It means you stop believing that your needs require a sales pitch. You're allowed to decline an invite without being busy. You're allowed to rest without being sick. You're allowed to choose your priorities without broadcasting every detail of your life. That's not rudeness. That's adulthood. That's clarity. And clarity in a world addicted to over-explanation feels like strength. It's worth noticing where this habit comes from. Many of us learned early on that no wasn't a safe answer. Maybe as kids, we had to defend our decisions to parents who didn't accept them. Maybe we were punished for disagreeing, even gently. So we learned to over-explain to avoid conflict. It worked then. But now it's sabotaging you, because the adult world respects calm certainty, not anxious monologues. People don't need all your reasons. They need your presence. They need your yes to mean yes, and your no to mean no. That's where trust begins. And ironically, when you say no with clarity and kindness, people actually push less. You think they'll be upset, but in truth, they feel the strength behind your words. They recognize that this is a person who means what they say, and you'll be surprised how often others back off, not because you convinced them, but because they sense that you weren't trying to. Carl Jung once wrote, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. And that includes accepting the parts of you that have limits, the part that gets tired, the part that needs quiet, the part that doesn't want to be pulled in a dozen directions just to keep everyone else comfortable. Honoring those parts isn't selfish, it's essential. Because when you live in constant explanation mode, you drain your energy trying to be understood instead of simply being whole. So how do you break the habit? Start with one sentence. That doesn't work for me. No tone, no story, no panic. Just say it, then stop. Let the silence speak. You don't need to fill it. You don't need to rush to soften it. Just breathe and let the moment land. At first, it will feel unnatural. You'll want to fill the space. But the more you practice, the more grounded it becomes. You can even add a simple follow-up if it feels too blunt at first. Something like, "Thanks for thinking of me though," or "I appreciate the invite." But those are additions, not defenses. You're not explaining. You're closing the loop with kindness, not collapsing into apology. People respect boundaries that are calmly enforced. They don't need drama. They don't need lectures. They need consistency. When someone sees that your no today doesn't require a 5-paragraph email, they begin to trust that you mean it. They also stop asking as often when they know you won't bend under pressure or pour your life story into every conversation. Plato said, "Wise men speak because they have something to say. Fools because they have to say something." When it comes to boundaries, say only what needs to be said. Let the silence do the rest. It's not empty. It's full of self-respect. And here's the quiet benefit of all this. When you stop over-explaining your no, your yes becomes more valuable. People know it's real. They know it comes from intention, not obligation. They stop taking it for granted. And you stop resenting the things you agree to because you've made space for what actually matters. This is what it means to live with inner strength, not to push people away, but to stop pushing yourself over the edge to accommodate them. To let your words be simple, your presence be firm, and your decisions be rooted in something deeper than fear. Because at the end of the day, your life is not a courtroom, and your peace is not up for debate. Speak less, stand taller, choose simplicity over performance, and trust that the people who truly belong in your life won't need a long explanation to respect your boundaries. They'll feel the clarity behind them, and they'll rise to meet it. The last-minute retreat dot. Their quotes a moment after you explain something, an idea, an instruction, a thought you've put real effort into. When it feels natural to ask, "Does that make sense?" You might say it automatically, even kindly, trying to be helpful. But beneath that surface-level politeness, there's a quiet signal being sent, one you probably don't even hear. What you're really saying is, "I'm not sure if I was clear. I'm not sure if I'm enough." You're giving your power away softly. You're handing the listener the authority to decide not just whether your message was clear, but whether you are clear. That's not humility. It's self-doubt in disguise. What starts as a harmless habit becomes a pattern that slowly erodes how people perceive your presence. Instead of anchoring your words in confidence, you build in uncertainty, and you do it at the very end, right when the message should be landing with clarity. You finish strong. And then, does that make sense? And with that, the strength dissolves. Because now it doesn't matter what you said. It matters whether someone else decides if it made sense. It's not that we shouldn't care if people understand us. Communication isn't one way, but the difference lies in posture. When you ask, does that make sense? It's often not about the content. It's about the speaker seeking reassurance. It's a reflex built in moments of self-doubt, a habit formed by years of thinking you need permission to be sure of yourself. Instead of owning the clarity you just delivered, you shrink back into the role of the uncertain one, and that's where the cracks start to show, not in your logic, but in your presence. The Stoics would call this a misalignment of internal stability. Marcus Aurelius said, "If you are pained by external things, it is not they that disturb you, but your own judgment of them." That same principle applies here. The words you speak, the way you explain, the way you carry your voice, all of it flows from internal belief. If you believe what you're saying has value, you don't ask the room to validate it every time you finish a sentence. You let the idea land. You trust that those who are meant to understand it will, or they'll ask questions if they need to. You speak not for applause, but from alignment. Think about the people you respect most. Do they constantly ask if they're making sense? Do they tiptoe around their ideas, hoping not to confuse anyone? Or do they speak clearly, then give space for others to respond naturally? There's a difference between being clear and seeming unsure. And while your intention might be clarity, the delivery often sounds like you're second-guessing yourself. That's the trap. What's more powerful is a subtle shift in language. Instead of asking, "Does that make sense?" and say, "What are your thoughts?" Or, "Let me know if you have questions." These alternatives keep the door open for discussion, but they don't undermine your credibility. They position you as someone who assumes clarity, not someone pleading for it. You shift from the person asking for approval to the person inviting conversation. It's a posture change, not a personality change, and it makes all the difference. This habit doesn't exist in isolation. It's part of a larger pattern of seeking reassurance. It shows up when you hold back in meetings, when you downplay your ideas, when you phrase everything as a question just to avoid sounding too certain. But that fear of being too confident is misplaced. Confidence, when grounded in truth and self-awareness, doesn't offend people, it calms them. It gives them something to lean on. It shows them you've done the thinking, that you've taken responsibility for what you're saying, and now you're here to offer it, not to beg for approval. Epictetus once said, "It is not events that disturb us, but our opinions about them." The same is true of how people react to us. Most of the time, they're not responding to our ideas, but to how we carry those ideas. If you carry them with quiet doubt, others feel that. If you carry them with grounded trust, that's what they reflect back. You set the tone, whether you realize it or not. Jung also pointed to this idea when he wrote, "The greatest burden a child must bear is the unlived life of the parents." And in this context, that unlived life is often the voice you never learned to trust. Maybe your environment taught you to hedge your thoughts. Maybe you were rewarded for being agreeable instead of assertive. So now, even when you know your material, even when your insight is sharp, that old programming kicks in, whispering, "Ask if it made sense. Don't assume you are clear. Don't risk being misunderstood." And so you bend, not because you're wrong, but because you're still afraid of being too right. But the truth is this: clarity doesn't come from constantly checking in. It comes from doing the work beforehand, shaping your message carefully and delivering it like it matters. When you're prepared, you don't need to ask if you were clear. You already know you were. And if someone needs clarification, they'll say so. That's not your responsibility to preempt. That's their responsibility to initiate. Your role is to show up, speak with care, and let your presence do the rest. There's a quiet power in assuming that you make sense. Not because you believe you're perfect, but because you trust that you've done the inner work to speak from truth. That trust is what others feel, and when they feel it, they lean in. They may not agree with everything you say, but they won't doubt your clarity. So the next time you feel that familiar urge to add, "Does that make sense?" pause. Replace it. Say, "Let me know if that raises any questions." or say nothing at all. Let the silence breathe, let your words settle. Let people absorb them on their own terms.
That's what confident communication sounds like. That's what self-trust feels like. Because when your words are clear, they don't need a chaser. They don't need to be padded with questions or softened by doubt. They just need space to echo. And in that echo, your presence grows stronger,
Not by force, but by quiet certainty. The slow betrayal of self. There's a kind of quiet exhaustion that lives inside people who can't say no. You can see it in their faces. Tight smiles, tired eyes, the constant tension of trying to be available for everything and everyone. They're the first to step up, the last to complain. You ask them for help and they say yes before you've even finished the question. They're dependable, they're selfless. But look a little closer and you'll see something else. Resentment, fatigue, a hollowed out version of someone who's always giving and never giving back to themselves. That's the price of saying yes to everything. You slowly disappear from your own life. It's not that helping others is wrong. Supporting the people around you is a beautiful thing. But when your generosity comes from fear instead of strength, it becomes a trap. You're not saying yes because it aligns with your values or your energy. You're saying yes because you're afraid of what happens if you don't. Afraid of seeming selfish, afraid of being left out, afraid of disappointing someone who might not understand your no. And so, out of fear, you give your time like it costs nothing. But time is the one thing you can never get back. Every yes that comes from fear is a withdrawal from your own life's account. People think that saying yes to everything makes them valuable, that being available means being needed, and being needed means being loved. But what it really does is make you common, predictable, easy to overlook. Because the truth is, people value what is scarce, what is intentional, what is protected. When you're always available, your presence loses weight. When you say yes out of habit, your word loses meaning. Even your most genuine support starts to feel obligatory. Not because people are ungrateful, but because you've trained them to expect it by default. This is where Stoic thinking becomes vital. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If you seek tranquility, do less, but not just any less. Do only what is essential." That means knowing your mission, knowing your values, and knowing when to say no without guilt, and yes, without resentment. The Stoics weren't cold, they were clear. They believed in aligning action with principle. That's where your strength lives. Not in being endlessly available, not in being agreeable, but in being intentional. You might worry that saying no will make people like you less. But here's the paradox. The people who truly matter, the ones who actually respect you, don't want the version of you that's stretched thin and quietly bitter. They want the whole you, the focused you, the grounded, present version of you. And that version only exists when you protect your time like it actually means something. Every time you say yes to something that drains you, you're saying no to the things that fill you. You're pushing aside your own needs, your goals, your peace, for someone else's convenience. This habit usually starts young. Maybe you were praised for being the easy one, the one who never complained, the one who always helped, the one who didn't ask for much. That praise slowly becomes part of your identity. You don't want to be difficult, so you overextend. You don't want to let people down, so you keep showing up even when you're falling apart. And over time, you learn to equate being needed with being enough. That's not generosity. That's survival. That's self-worth tangled up in approval. But you are allowed to choose where your energy goes. You are allowed to say, "Let me check and get back to you." Instead of defaulting to yes, that one sentence buys you time. It gives you space to check in with your own priorities. To ask yourself whether this request aligns with your values, your schedule, your peace. If it does, say yes with your full heart. But if it doesn't, say no and say it clean. Not with 10 apologies, not with a made-up excuse, just, "That doesn't work for me right now, but I hope it goes well." Real strength isn't about doing more, it's about doing what matters. And when you start filtering your decisions through that lens, your entire world begins to shift. People start to see you differently. They respect your time because you do. They stop expecting you to be their emotional crutch because you've drawn a line. And surprisingly, many of them admire you for it. Because you become someone who stands for something, someone with structure, with clarity, with boundaries, and that's rare, and rare is respected. Aristotle believed that virtue lives in balance between extremes. Too much selflessness turns into self-erasure. Too much self-focus turns into arrogance. The balance is knowing your limits and honoring them without apology. When you give from that place, it's felt,
It's real, and it doesn't come with the hidden cost of exhaustion or resentment. That's the kind of presence people remember. Not because you said yes to everything, but because you showed up fully for the things that truly mattered. So the next time someone asks for your time,
pause. Ask yourself, not just do I have time, but do I have the energy? Do I have the space? Do I actually want to? If the answer is yes, give it freely. But if it's a no, or even a maybe, protect your boundary. You don't owe anyone access to your life just because they asked for it. Your time is not a public resource. It's your most personal asset. Guard it, shape it, own it. Because at the end of the day, people won't remember you for how many times you said yes. They'll remember how you showed up when it truly counted. And that version of you, the focused, present, intentional one, that's the version that changes lives, starting with your own. The language of self-shrinking. It slips into your sentences like it belongs there. Almost invisible, almost harmless. I just wanted to check in. Just making sure. Just a quick question. That one tiny word just sounds polite, gentle, reasonable. But look closer. It's doing something deeper. It's shrinking your presence. It takes whatever confidence your words held and softens them into suggestion instead of assertion. This isn't just language. It's posture. And every time you use it, you're quietly telling the world, hey, I know I'm interrupting. I know I'm asking for something I maybe shouldn't. Please don't see me as a burden. And once people feel that energy from you, they respond accordingly. Most people use just to sound nice, to seem non-threatening, to avoid sounding pushy. But here's what actually happens. Your words lose weight, your voice loses clarity, and your message becomes forgettable. It's like knocking on a door with a feather and hoping someone hears it. But softness without presence goes unnoticed. In a world full of noise, uncertain voices get tuned out fast. It's not aggression that earns attention. It's conviction. Quiet, respectful conviction. That's what the Stoics understood. What you say is only half the story. How you say it, how grounded your language is, tells people whether to lean in or move on. This isn't about removing kindness. It's about removing self-minimization. There's a difference. When you say, I just wanted to ask, you're asking for permission to exist in the conversation. You're pre-apologizing for taking up space. But when you say, I wanted to ask, you're communicating intention. Still respectful, still kind, but not small. And that subtle shift changes everything. How people hear you, how they respond, whether they feel your presence or brush past it. It's especially visible in written communication. Look at your emails, your texts, your DMs. You'll probably be surprised how often just shows up. It slips in quietly, almost unnoticed. You think it softens your tone, makes you sound easygoing, but really it chips away at your credibility. Sentence by sentence, you write, just following up on this, instead of following up on this. You type, just wanted to say thank you, instead of simply, thank you. One sounds like a favor, the other sounds like a statement. That's the difference confidence makes. Confidence isn't loud. It doesn't shout, but it also doesn't apologize for existing. When your words match your worth, people pay attention, not because you're trying to impress them, but because you're speaking from alignment. There's nothing extra, no fluff, no hedging, and that kind of clarity feels rare today. In a world full of over-explaining, over-apologizing, over-smoothing, one clean sentence can feel like a lightning bolt. Epictetus once said, first say to yourself what you would be, and then do what you have to do. That includes how you speak. So ask yourself, who do you want to be when you walk into a room? When you send an email? When you speak in a conversation? The person who tiptoes in, hoping not to disturb the air, or the person who speaks calmly, clearly, then let silence carry the rest. Because when you speak like your words are a disruption, others will treat them that way too.
But when you speak like your words have weight, people stop. They feel them. That's the problem with it's weightless. It's filler. And worse, it teaches your own mind
that what you're saying might not matter. So speak clean. Stand firm. Remove the extra words. Not to sound powerful, but because you already are. Let your sentences land. Let silence work for you. And remember, the strongest presence in the room is never the loudest one. It's the one that doesn't shrink. Cut the filler, keep the truth, and let your words carry weight.